Euphoria, a feeling or state of immense excitement and happiness. In contemporary medicine and psychology, euphoria can describe abnormal or inappropriate feelings such as those caused by an illicit drug or an illness. Every now and then, a show takes the internet by storm, and it seems like everyone is watching it. In anime, it happened to Demon Slayer in 2019. Hell, just a few days ago, the Korean drama Squid Game took over the world for a good amount of time. And right now, the new sensation seems to be the show Euphoria. Euphoria is not a new show though. Its first season aired on HBO Max in 2019 and it was a pretty successful little show. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it didn't need to be. However, season 2 has seen a 100+% increase in viewership over its predecessor, which is absolutely bonkers. But still, it felt like a show that every child from r/I'm 14 and this is deep is raving about, and how the characters are #relatable. It also felt like the show would put over drugs in a positive manner, which I personally disagree with. Also, I had a big list of anime that I wanted to watch, so ultimately, I wasn't very interested in watching this show. What's that? What does she mean? I'm suddenly very interested in watching this show. I was actually surprised to learn that HBO Max made Euphoria, and I legit had massive expectations in terms of production quality when it came to the show. And I am happy to say that the expectations have indeed been met. The show looked gorgeous, and at no point did I think that it did not look stunning. It was a vibrant and aesthetically pleasing show when it comes to visuals, but when it comes to the audio, oh my god, was it overwhelming at times. Take a guess of how many musical sequences there were in the series. Musical sequences, as in a song plays for a while before another one plays. Take a guess. 20? Aim higher. 50? No. 100? Close. According to the Euphoria wiki, the total number of musical sequences in the entire series was 136. 136 fucking musical sequences over just 8 episodes. And that's like a lower guess too, because some websites are saying that the first season of Euphoria had more than 150 songs in its first season. Do you understand why I call it overwhelming now? Please do let me know in the comments, because I would love to know if it was just for me or not. I really don't like when the music shines over the moments, and at points, I really thought that the music slightly undermined the moments from the main characters. Speaking of the main characters, this is as good a segue as any to talk about the main characters. There were mainly 7 main characters in the series, but honestly, the show sort of made McKay a supporting character, so we will talk about him later. But for now, let's focus on these 6 main characters. And when I tell you that Rue, the main character who's a drug addict and in love with her trans best friend, and Maddy, the cheerleader slutty character who's in a very toxic relationship with her boyfriend, are 2 of the tame characters, you know we're in for a ride. Jules is Rue's best friend who's a transgender woman, and she likes to have one-night stands with older men, especially older married white men. Cassie has fallen in love with every guy she has ever dated, and even when she didn't want to, agreed to make a sex tape with every boyfriend that asked her, a choice that haunts her to this day. By the end of the season, she gets pregnant with her boyfriend McKay's child and gets an abortion. Kate is your typical slightly overweight character who's a virgin and thinks that no guy would ever be attracted to her, or at least in the beginning. Because when her sex tape gets leaked and she sees that there are people who like it, this underage character becomes a cam girl, which makes her rich and changes her personality to being absolutely unlikable. And then Nate. Oh boy. This high school jock is battling sexual identity confusion while also having the most toxic relationship with his girlfriend Maddy. He uses brute force to get most of what he wants and is quite possibly the worst character in the series. He beats the shit out of Tyler, a guy who has sex with his girlfriend Maddy after she lies about being blacked out drunk. He catfishes and blackmails Jules, He reports Rue's drug dealer Fez to the authorities when Fez tells him to leave Rue and her friends alone. And after he chokes Maddy and the marks on her neck get noticed by the authorities, he forces Tyler to confess that he assaulted Maddy and blackmailed Jules into giving a false statement to the police, leading to him getting away absolutely scot-free. The characters are completely fucking wild, and there's a good side and a bad side to it. The good side is that every character felt different, and no two characters felt like copy my homework but change a couple of things version of one another. The closest we got to that is between Maddy and Cassie, both hot and attractive cheerleaders who wear rather revealing clothes at times, much to the dismay of their boyfriends, and have a rather rocky relationship with their significant other. Even then, the show has done a good job in making them distinguishable. Everything from their overall appearance, their looks, their personality, their past history, and even their story and character arcs were different enough to distinguish between them very easily. The bad thing, however, is that almost every character is over the top. Again, the fact that the lesbian who overdosed on Xanax or some shit in her teenage, who fell in love with a transgender friend, is one of the tame characters, that speaks volumes. There were very few characters whose story didn't include multiple layers, which on one hand is good because it gives the character and the story much more depth and intrigue, but again, I would have liked to catch a few more characters like Lexi or Ethan, simply a little less convoluted. But let's talk about the story. I actually was very surprised and happy with how this show showed the effects of drug and drug addiction. I was highly skeptical about how the show would deal with drugs and stuff, given that its name is Euphoria, and I thought that it would romanticize the idea of doing drugs and being high like so many other shows have, but it didn't. It showed it in possibly the most realistic way. How Rue went back to drugs again and again to escape her real life situations, how she blamed Fez for ruining her life by providing her with drugs, but still screamed at him and demanded more drugs, and even after understanding what her use of drugs has done to her and her family, she went back to snorting cocaine to again get that momentary relief after she loses Jules, as we ended up back to square one. Exceptionally well done, no complaints there. The show also put forward Maddy and Nate's toxic relationship really well, how these two people know that they just cause pain to one another, but even then they can't quit because they're madly in love. Cassie's struggle with her sexual past and activities and also getting the abortion were also very well done. I loved a lot of it. I also want to say that the first few minutes of the first 7 episodes being used to basically introduce and develop the characters and their motives by just showing us their past and their history was a genius move that I hope more shows pick up. It's such a simple thing to do too, and adds so much to the people behind the screen. Rue's addiction, Nate's sexual insecurities, Maddy's history with Nate, Cassie's sexual past haunting her, Jules' hatred towards her mom, McKay's struggle of meeting his dad's expectations, and Kate's insecurities about her world were all wonderfully explained in just the first 5 minutes or so of each episode. But again, there is stuff that they could have definitely improved upon. I have already talked about the over-reliance on music and the over-the-top nature of many characters, but there are some stuff that I didn't necessarily like. For example, Kate. I borderline hated Kate's character, even more than Nate's, because she got legit no repercussions for being a cam girl and a sex worker while being a minor, and also not treating her friends well when she got some money and some good dresses. I legit have nothing positive to say about her other than she kind of turned back to being nice at the end. Also, her stories felt much more disconnected than others. One good thing about Euphoria are its intertwined stories, like Nate's whole relation with Maddy and his whole thing with Jules and Tyler. Jules has important story beats with both Nate, his father, and most importantly, Rue. Rue had her whole story about addiction and then her whole saga with Jules. And most characters felt like a part of an overarching story. Not Kate though. Kate had a completely isolated story and her actions had legit zero impact on any other story as far as I can remember. That's one of my massive problems. Also, McKay was being portrayed as an important character, but I'll be honest, he was less important and less interesting than a lot of side characters like Fez and Ethan. And hey, if you think that the first season was flawless, all the power to you. I'm not going to argue about how you should feel, but this is how I feel. It was a good season, and although the pace slowed down a little bit in the later episodes, I believe the overall season was very enjoyable. So I will give it an 80% score. Genuinely, two of my favorite episodes are just two special episodes because of their incredibly simple premise. Mostly taking place in a single location, fixated on a single character, and shows how the ending of the previous season affected them. I think it bridged the gap between season 1 and season 2 really well, so I will break down both the episodes in their entirety, and let's start with the first one. Rue goes to talk to Ali about how she's been handling the whole deal with Jules, leaving her behind, and I love that the more experienced veteran immediately picked up on the fact that Rue isn't clean. I also love the fact that this episode built up Ali's character a bit more too. Before, he was just a guy that was mentoring Rue, but now we get a much more detailed look into his past, about how his addiction led to him hurting his family emotionally, and in the case of his wife, physically too. We also got to know that his faith in God is what has been driving him forward, and how all he has is a phone call to talk to his daughters on Christmas Eve, since he isn't allowed to go meet them. We also got an in-depth look into Rue's psyche, how she isn't planning on being sober anytime soon, how she knew that Jules cheated on her while they were in a relationship, and how she hates herself because she did the unforgivable crime of hitting her mom and trying to kill her with a shard of glass. Again, I loved the character development in this episode. I think the best line from this episode is Rue's answer when Ali asks her what she wants her family to remember her as after she kills herself, and she answers with,
As someone who tried really hard to be someone I couldn't.
Genuinely, this is a contender for my favorite Euphoria episode. Loved it to my core. Episode 2 isn't as simplistic or even as good as episode 1, but even then it is an amazing episode. This time we pick it up with Jules as she goes to meet a therapist and talks about her feelings. She opens up about her need to please men, her relationship with Rue and why she liked her constant struggle to not hurt herself, her relationship or lack thereof with her mother, and her fling with Shy Guy 118, aka Nate. We also got a sequence of seeing her dreaming of living with Rue in New York City turn into a nightmare as she finds Rue lying on the ground of her bathroom, a complete parallel to how her mother overdosed on drugs. Speaking of whom, we also catch a glimpse of how her refusal to talk to her sober mother might have been what led to her to start drinking again, as we understand how Rue's addiction affected Jules as she has been through this ringer before. It is a great episode, but again, problems. Unlike the last episode, there are certain moments where I thought that the music undoubtedly overwhelmed the moments. I can't convey that better than this note I made while watching the show. Can we calm down with the opera music while she talks about hurting herself, please? Again, calm down with the music. Also, while I'm complaining, I wish they really had saved the first meetup between Jules and Rue for the second season and had not jammed it here. It's a nitpick for sure, but I would have loved it if this episode was completely a breakdown of Jules' character and her past. Anyway, even then, these two episodes definitely did their job and got me hyped for the next season, so good job there. I'll be completely honest. This season had the best and worst of Euphoria. So many iconic moments, but so many weird decisions. We'll get to all of that, but let's start with Jesus Christ did the characters to a 180-degree turn. If I had told you by the end of last season that one of the better and one of the worst characters would be Nate and Cassie, you would assume that Nate would be the bad one and Cassie would be the good one, right? Right? Well, do I have some news for you. Most characters went through a character overhaul in this season, and I would say mostly for the better. Anyway, let's talk about the plot because it is so fucking wild. So, in order for it to make sense, let's follow the story of every single important character. When Maddy and Nate were on a break, he cheats on Maddy with her best friend Cassie, and he thinks of Cassie as his ideal girlfriend. Cassie has already broken up with McKay and also falls madly in love with Nate, and even though her sleeping with Nate effectively ends her friendship with the rest of the girls, she moves in with Nate. Also, by the end of the season, Nate sort of breaks up with her, so I don't know how that works. Nate also hands over his pedophile dad over to the authorities after Cal leaves his family behind and moves out. He hands all the sex tape to the police, but not before returning Jules and Cal's sex tape to the former. Speaking of Jules, she and Rue are at a bad place in their relationship after the train scene from last season, and Rue copes with that pain by doing drugs. She falls back to her old habits and forms a friendship with another drug addict named Elliot. Elliot, Rue, and Jules also have sort of a love triangle, and Jules kind of cheats on Rue with Elliot. On the other side, Rue pitches a genius drug dealing idea to a drug dealer named Laurie, who helps her set it up but warns Rue that failure would have disastrous consequences. After Jules learns about Rue's relapse, she and Elliot tell Rue's mother, who flushes all the drugs given to her by Laurie down the toilet. Rue eventually has a massive meltdown and also decides to stay clean from there on forward. Also, she exposes Nate and Cassie's relationship to Maddy. So there you go. By the end of the season, she doesn't get back with Jules after both of them watch Lexi's play. Speaking of whom, the standout new main character's whole deal is that she's trying to come out of her more popular, hotter sister's shadow, and to do so, she writes and directs a play regarding the life of most of her friends and their relationships so far. She also starts to develop a relationship with Fezco, who is unable to attend her play as the authorities raid his place, which leads to the death of Ashtray. Also, Fezco beats the shit out of Nate in the first episode after smashing a bottle over his head, which led to Nate being reborn and starting his redemption arc. Well, as redemptive as it can be. So many story threads intertwined one with another, and that's what makes the plot so much fun to follow. Oh, also, Kate guilted Ethan into breaking up with her after saying that she has a terminal brain disorder. And none of this has any impact on any of the other stories. I hate her so much. Season 2 is much better in terms of the overall story and plot as compared to the last season, and some of the character arcs are at the very least fascinating. However, I cannot talk about the season without talking about the ending. How the fuck do you make the ending to this season so underwhelming? How is that even possible? Episode 7 was one of the most chaotic yet intriguing episodes in the series' history, but the follow-up was so shit. Other than the death of Ashtray at the hand of the cops, the entire episode was so meh. Rue and Jules had a shit ending. Nate reported his dad to the authorities but had no resolve with Maddy or Cassie. Speaking of whom, she barely got beaten up by Maddy and nothing else happened. Kate didn't even get any comeuppance for breaking up with Ethan in such a horrible way. It's such a weird episode. Lexi's play was cool and all, but beyond confusing. At points, I was confused of what was happening in the play and what was happening in real life. And also, I was beyond confused at one point because Lexi's play had a part where Rue compliments Lexi for the play. What kind of Inception bullshit was that? But now that I've shit on this shit episode, let me show my appreciation for one of the best episodes of the series, if not the best, episode 5. Episode 5 is borderline perfect. I love it so much. Here's a quick summary of it. Jules and Elliot tell Rue's mom about Rue's intense relapse, and they flush all the drugs Rue got from Laurie down the toilet. Rue has a massive breakdown, insulting everyone around her, and then breaks down and starts crying before apologizing to her mom and accepting help. However, on her way back to therapy, she has second thoughts and runs away from her car. She ends up from places to places, like Fez's home and Lexi and Cassie's home, but eventually has to steal money from someone's home, to pay back a part of her debt to Laurie. The ending was a bit weird, sure, but I was spellbound by this episode. There aren't many shows that can stop me from making notes and just keep staring at the screen in awe, but this episode did it, especially when Rue was having a complete breakdown as she started to break down the door to her sister's room. I also loved how this episode showed the massive side effect of drug usage and how in the end, Rue was not just suffering by herself but was a menace to everyone around her. Fantastic episode and my favorite of the entire series. Some thoughts on the season that I couldn't fit anywhere else. The season made me realize that there are 2 or 3 actors who were comfortable with being fully naked on camera, like Jules and definitely Cassie, but everyone else was definitely on the other side of the fence. Oh, and for those of you who thought that every other male actor was actually naked, bad news. Apparently, they were all prosthetic.
Did you all know that every time a main character on the show Euphoria pulls their penis out, it's not their real penis? It's a fake penis. In fact, it's a stunt penis. It's actually just a prosthetic that sits in a trailer and gets doctored up and gets plastered to their body when it's time to whip out. Isn't that disappointing, coming from a show that's so highly artistic and, all about vulnerability? These actors want to call themselves actors, but they don't even want to pull their dicks out on camera.
I know. Even I'm disappointed, and I'm straighter than uncooked noodles. I didn't expect Fez and Lexi to be the most wholesome pair coming out of the season, but I surely am not disappointed. And all I want for them is to get that perfect ending. Everyone else can suck it. Maybe except Ethan. Ethan's awesome. Another thing, I still hate Kate, and I hate her even more. Again, I'm not anti-plus size characters, as I can feel some of those comments coming, but a character that willingly does underage sex work, profits off of it, is an asshole to everyone around her, changes her personality as the bucks keep flowing in, and finally guilts her genuinely great boyfriend into breaking up with her. No wonder I don't like her. So, how to rate this season? The first 7 episodes are very, very good. I would have given it an 85%, and had the ending stuck, it would have been an easy 90 piece. But the ending was so shit and so anticlimactic that it brought it down all the way to 75. I'm sorry. I know it was incredibly buzzworthy, but quality-wise, the first season was better. Alright, here are my final thoughts on the series. It is actually really good and portrays the effect of drug addiction, toxic relationship, and more really well. It's also one of the best visually looking shows that I've seen in a long time. It is a very interesting show, but it definitely is not perfect. And while some people might tell you that it is perfect or the greatest show ever, it's definitely not even close. But even then, it is a show that you should go out of your way to watch. Thank you everybody so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I know I said that I would do an Attack on Titan video next, but actually that's coming out in April after Attack on Titan ends, so I thought let's do a video on Euphoria, which I was watching anyway. Let me know what else you want to see in the comments. I would love to make more videos, and hopefully by the end of the month I should be able to get another video out. Thanks again, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you in the next one.